Alright, so this is going to be my reaction on how to finally get into Gundam by Bonsai Pop. Been wanting to watch this since it came out, so I'm gonna watch it today. Now, if I was gonna recommend Gundam, I'd want to say probably like my favorite's gonna be 08 MS Team, and so I'd like to recommend that, but honestly, it's probably a bit too old to actually recommend. Even though it's really good, I really love how it like the Gundams in it, they feel like real machines. Just the way the gravity, how they animated the gravity and stuff working on them, and it's like a gritty war movie. But the animation is a little dated. So even though 08 MS Team is definitely my favorite, it's probably not one I'd recommend. I'd probably have to go with probably Gundam Unicorn, just because it's in the UC timeline. So if you're trying to get into Gundam, it's modern animation. Hathaway is a really good one if you just want a movie, but if you're not into Gundam, you might be a bit confused with the storyline. And Origin is really good as well, but I wouldn't say that's really getting into Gundam. Like it's good and it's good standalone story, but I think Origin is a lot better if you know what comes after. I think getting to know the UC timeline before watching Origin just makes Origin that much better, in my opinion. And aside from 08 MS Team, 0080 is really good as well. I think 0080 probably holds up a little better than 08 MS Team. But 08 is definitely still my favorite. Probably partially because, nostalgia. It's the one I kind of grew up with. I actually didn't get to see the last couple episodes of 08 when I was little, because I went on summer vacation. So as far as I knew, the main characters had died. The main dude and Aina, the girl love interest. I thought they were just dead. And then I went on summer vacation. I just could not stop thinking about it, because I just assumed they were dead, and that's how the show basically ended. And that kind of stuck with me for a long time, because I had to wait till Adult Swim was showing reruns of that show after that summer to actually figure out what happened. Kind of the same thing with Inuyasha and the way it ended. That's getting off topic there, but that one for Inuyasha, it kind of ended, and that's when I was just getting on the dial-up internet there and looking through forums trying to figure out what happened, and some guy did some fanfic, I guess, about how the way it ended was Kagome went home and married that childhood friend she had in class and lived happily ever after. And that kind of pissed me off, because like, what about Inuyasha, man? But of course, that turned out all right, because we finally get some Inuyasha coming back, and they redid all that. But back to Gundam, the 08 MS Team not getting that ending for quite a while. That made that show stick with me. That's all I could think about that whole summer. So definitely some nostalgia there for that, which is why I'd probably say Unicorn's the best one to try and get your friends into Gundam if you want to stick to the UC timeline. Iron Blooded Orphan's one everybody loves. I wasn't too big a fan for it, but it's definitely a good Gundam. And the Witch from Mercury is pretty solid as well. It's problem with that is that one's really slow at start. I tried to get a friend to watch the new Gundam that's coming out, and he's never watched Gundam, and he dropped that one just because the start of Witch from Mercury is just really slow. It definitely picks up, but I wish they would not done a school slice of life for so long. But let's get into this video and see what he says.
There is a lot.
This is by let me go look that up real quick.
There is a lot.
Bonsai Pop. So let's get this video started here.
There is a lot of anime out there. We are talking a medium that spans literally every genre of storytelling, from the vanilla to tentacles, you know what I mean? You do, perv. Anyway, my entire life there's always been one section of the anime ethos I just didn't get. In fact, it took me watching Great Teacher Onizuka, something completely unrelated.
Onizuka's a really good one. That's another one that's one of the first things I probably ever pirated off the internet. I don't remember what the program was. It was like it's like a internet chat relay thing, but it had a way to download files on it. And that's where I downloaded a lot of the first anime on dial-up internet, so it took forever. Onizuka, I think, is one of the ones I downloaded that way, along with a bunch of other really old ones.
To put it into
But Onizuka's a really good anime.
To words. People who like Gundam
speak
a different language. A language that is completely unintelligible to outsiders and frankly...
Yeah, there are 3 Gundam freaks in the Great Teacher Onizuka. They're gonna be, war in the pocket.
Reeks of virginity. It's not their fault, I'm sure they slay, but let's...
And that girl they just showed there was, she was kind of a bully, and then she got paired up for a school field trip. They ran her ragged with Gundam facts.
Be honest, if you hear somebody talking about the Vulcan cannons on Gundam RX-78CA, it's hard to imagine them communicating with a romantic interest. However, when you look at one of these bad boys, it's hard not to be impressed. Gundams are cool. That is undeniable.
And that's 0080. That was Nina over there. A lot of people hate her. I thought she was alright. These are nuclear-powered Gundams there.
Mega swag on these mega robots. Big, bad, flying mech suits with giant guns and beam swords. They are iconic. Everyone knows what a Gundam is, but very few know a single thing about them. And that was me. Sure, I'd watch Gundam Wing and G Gundam, but it turns out that those are alternate universe shows, like the Marvel Ultimate series, which I think might be an...
Yeah, Gundam Wing was probably the one a lot of people saw in the West first, because that's what Cartoon Network pretty much showed nonstop. And it probably was my first Gundam there. Gundam Wing's really good. Not as good as the UC timeline, though, in my opinion.
Outdated reference. The Ultimate series is still a thing, right? Oh my god, it's not. These side series are fun watches. Well, at least G Gundam is fun. Wing is a little dour. But G Gundam has mobile fighters. Gundam with a bodysuit.
I did not care for G Gundam. G Gundam's pretty similar to, if you want to do like a movie equivalent of that, it'd be kind of similar to Pacific Rim kind of deal, where they're inside and their suit controls the Gundam, and then the countries are dueling each other instead of fighting wars and stuff. And all the robots are a racist stereotype.
Control system that mimic real life human movement.
That's probably
Gundam
Mexico.
Wing is... well, it's complicated, and I don't feel like explaining it again, so check out our video on it here. After this one, of course, come on. Regardless, it was in that moment while watching GTO where this normal girl loses her mind after getting stuck on a field trip with Gundam nerds that I realized I should learn the language. I mean, it's literally my job. I got friends within the anime YouTube sphere that are obsessed with Gundam. I got fans in the same boat as well. It's my duty and medical neurosis to know what they're talking about. So late last year, I decided to take the dive. I willingly chose to devote a ridiculous amount of time to consuming Gundam, doing research, figuring out what I needed to watch, and more specifically, how to watch it. And now I'm going to share it.
83 is what I meant at the beginning there, not 0080. 0080 I've never actually seen. I know it would be really good to watch. It's kind of like the Christmas special of Gundam. Like Gundam fans like watch that like my dad would watch It's a Wonderful Life kind of deal. But it's one of those where I know it'd be really good, and so I just can't bring myself to actually watch it because I know it's also really sad. And so I know I would enjoy it, but I also don't want to watch it because of that. I know it's weird. But yeah, 0080's the Christmas one, War in the Pocket, and then 0083 Stardust Memories. That's the one I was thinking of at the start there.
it with you. Why? Because it was actually awesome, like incredibly good, some of the best put together anime I have seen to date, and I have watched an absurd, frankly unhealthy amount of anime. I'm going to
me
give
too,
you
brother.
a history of the franchise and a roadmap of exactly how I became a Gundam nerd, because what I found when I actually took the time to give this universe of content a shot was something truly special. It's never too late to take that dive. I waited until I was 30, and I'm not going to pretend I'm the Gundam aficionado, but I did my due diligence and I made it into the conversation. I can speak some Gundam, but more importantly, I fell in love with the series. Naturally, I want the same for you. Here we go. The name's Bones, Mikey Bones. I'm in an undisclosed, sponsored by NordVPN witness protection location. When it comes to my cool guy lifestyle, having the right VPN is a life or death decision. NordVPN is the only one I trust. With Nord as my backup, not only do I got a family helping to stop mooks from trying to steal my data, but I also got way more options for shows to watch. Crunchyroll has geo restrictions, meaning you can't access certain anime if you're in the wrong country. But that's not a problem for a guy like me. I like my anime uncensored and I like your kneecaps on, alright? Let's try to keep it that way. With just a couple of clicks, not only am I connected to whatever country of the dozens Nord gives me the option for, but I don't have to be hamstrung by region lock, and I know all about hamstringing clowns. With Nord, it's like blowing a lock, stealing all of somebody's best anime from the comfort of your own home. And it works for all streaming services. You can indefinitely expand your anime library with just the click of a button. So stop putting all your information on display and get a ton more shows to watch in the process. Get a deal you can't refuse on a 2-year plan plus 4 bonus months by clicking the special personal discount link in the description. Oh, and the best part, it's risk-free with a 30-day back money guarantee. I swear, I'm a good guy. I'm literally giving you a way to get all the anime that you want for free. That's free protection. All you gotta do is click the link, and if you don't like it, because I'm a nice guy, you get it all back. So click that link in the description if you know it's good for you. Now back to it. So first things first, I am going to be hitting some plot points here and there, but this will be a spoiler-free video. My goal is to introduce newcomers to the Gundam franchise, specifically the...
I'm liable to spoil things just without thinking about it, so don't watch my reaction if you don't want to be spoiled.
Main timeline. I'm going to be looking into each series in the order they take place in the timeline to give people a direction and a little bit of what to expect, as well as my personal feelings on each series. This is not a deep dive for Gundam nuts, but instead, it's my attempt at setting up a honey trap for the curious. If you are a Gundam enthusiast, I hope you enjoy hearing my experiences and opinions. For newbies, I recommend coming back to the video after you get sucked into Gundam, seeing how good a job I did, giving the video a like, commenting to tell me how awesome I am, and then subscribing and watching every single one of our videos 5 times. If you do love Gundam, please let me know which of the series that I'm talking about today is your favorite. I would really love to actually do deep, dedicated dives into these shows for you. Lastly, know that Gundam is one of those series, maybe the penultimate series, where you can't really miss an episode. There is constant character and plot development in every single episode, and if you miss one, you end up lost immediately. It is that intense, and
Yeah, I guess most especially in the UC timeline, it's definitely plot heavy. There's some Gundam shows that are a little more episodic. Some of the alternate universes there, but yeah, definitely the main timeline. You probably don't want to miss anything.
that well written. Small note on that, not every single one of the series that I'm going to be talking about is necessary to watch in order to understand what's going on in the whole plot. We'll get into that later, but for now, it's history time. Gundam hit Japan like a brick 44 years ago in 1979 with Mobile Suit Gundam. Yes, the animated show was first, no manga, and it wasn't the first mecha anime. That's a rabbit hole of its own, which I am not ready for, but it did, however, begin the real robot subgenre of the mech genre to its credit. To be classified as real robot, the depicted mechs need to be actual robots, not robots with mystical superpowers. These things need to make some kind of sense mechanically. They can be futuristic, but based within realism. Real Robot generally has mechs mass-produced as mobile units for war. While the mechs are the draw, what generally locks people in are the complex characters and sweeping stories that accompany them. We're talking too many characters and allegiances to count. Series in this genre are therefore generally aimed at young adults instead of kids.
Yeah, so the real robots are the like you was saying, the ones that make sense scientifically, sort of. Like obviously it's fake science for the show, but the logic is there for why everything works, and there's not like any magic going on. They like kind of like Star Trek, where obviously the lithium crystals and stuff don't actually exist, but it's like a it makes sense how their world works. That that's where the power is coming from. So that's kind of how the real robot genre works. Like the robots work because it's science in the show. So there's a logic to how it's working. It's not just magic, and it's not like a super robot show where you've got these massive giant robots. Usually, kind of like just think of Power Rangers. That would be the super robot, where you get one robot that's really huge, or it's made up of a bunch of different robots, and they don't really explain how it works. It just works. While Gundam, everything's grounded in a sort of reality. And he's right. There's tons of characters because it's an overarching story of both sides. There's you got your good and evil sides, but also within those, both sides have good and evil within them.
Kids, and having watched Gundam Wing as a kid and understanding literally none of it, I absolutely feel that statement. Having watched the original 1979 Mobile Suit Gundam as an adult, I understand that statement. What I imagine nobody expected was how much
Wing's definitely more towards it leans towards the magic robot kind of thing. The way the Gundam Wing works. It's still real robot, I think, but they don't explain a lot how everything works as well, I think, in some of the other Gundams do. And they're flying around in these crazy machines with wings and stuff. And I think Wing was, if I'm not mistaken, targeted towards the West, so it was a bit different than the others. I could be wrong there. I've read that a number of places, but I've never really stopped to fact check. It just seemed to make sense because that's the one that was shown so much over here.
Much this niche subgenre would impact the world. You fast forward those 44 years to now, and Gundam has spawned over 50 TV series, films, and OVAs, a mountain of manga and video games, and if you see those figures back there on my shelves, Gundam makes up 90% of that market. By 2000, the Gundam franchise had made $5 billion. Now it makes $774 million a year. Almost half of that is model kits. They even created a virtual academy with
their Gunpla model kits is a huge market. There's a lot of people that do those. I've put a couple together myself. It's a fun thing to do, especially how intricate they are. It's not like just putting a toy together. It's tons of little pieces and a great way to pass the time and feel like you did something afterwards because all the work you put in to actually set it up and everything. I don't do them all that much, but they are quite fun to do if you got some time laying around.
Some of the greatest minds in Japan, focused entirely on making the technology in Gundam real. Gundam is a big deal. It's permanently affected anime and world pop culture and technology. A Gundam is just as iconic as Godzilla, Goku, Lum, or Hello Kitty, or even Mickey Mouse. Now, because this video is for beginners, people who are interested in the series and maybe looking to get into it or get a taste of what it's about, I'm not going to get into crazy nitty-gritty stuff or throw a bunch of names at you that you don't care about. It's more important to know that the series was put out by a subgroup at Sunrise Studios and created by Yoshiyuki Tomino, who's so famous, there's actually a picture of him. The other important person to note is Kunio Okawara, the first person ever hired in the anime industry to be specifically a mechanical designer. Part of the reason people are so nuts about Gundam to begin with is the actual realism of the design and the science that went into creating this series. We're talking down to Lagrange points and the use of helium-3 for power. For tech nerds, and let's be honest, there's a lot of those in Japan, Gundam is a dream come true. That said, not diving into that, if I start talking about Minovsky particles, I'm gonna lose people. But in the end, and for most people, none of that really matters. What matters is whether this series is good. So what is the series? If I'm not talking...
Minovsky particles are one of their phenomenon for that the Gundam engines kind of produce. And the way it's kind of explained is that you could spread these out and it causes interference with like radios and stuff. So that's kind of one of their ways of making space combat a little more nitty gritty and dynamic, because you get a real fog of war even with all this high tech sensors and stuff, since they don't work inside the monosky particles.
Talking about G Gundam or Gundam Wing or Witch from Mercury, what exactly am I talking about? The answer is the Universal Century. The Universal Century is the core timeline of the Gundam franchise. It's the real deal, the original, and definitely the most complex, which is saying a lot. And let's be real, most people are in my boat. If they dipped a toe into Gundam, they likely watched Wing. That series alone has people switching sides left and right so often it's hard to tell what's going on half the time. And Gundam, like a lot of Japanese franchises, looking at you, Zelda, also didn't exactly come out in order from first to last. They're still slotting things into the Universal Century between the major series just willy-nilly. That creates a bit of whiplash. You start with a modern anime, then the sequel is made in 1979, and then you go into the early 90s anime. You get it. But honestly, it's kind of fun like that, but enough preamble. So obviously my first recommendation is to start with the Universal Century. You want to understand what Gundam is really about, and that is the human experience of war. Now, G Gundam is fun and all, but what a lot of people don't realize is how intricate and realized the Universal Century is. Some people say that Gundam is Japan's answer to Star Trek, but that couldn't be farther from the truth. Gundam is a space opera like no other, easily surpassing Star Wars in scope, and it is definitely better written. We've all seen anime and movies about war, and to be honest, it's generally not my go-to. However, Gundam carefully explores this experience through the eyes of complex characters with a wide range of human emotion from its initial debut until today. My next recommendation for you is to watch all of the Universal Century. Go all in. I mean, what kind of anime fan are you if you don't consume literally all of everything in a franchise? You can't even hold your head high up at a con. Come on, man. Don't be a loser's loser. That's self-deprecation. Also, before anybody freaks out in the comments, I'm not going over any films. I'm also stopping at Char's Counterattack. If I don't have somebody by Double Zeta, I'm not going to catch them anyway. But for the uninitiated, know almost every series has a film or two attached. Feel free to watch them if you want to. So now that you're primed, ready to give up multiple days, possibly weeks of your life, it's time to watch Mobile Suit Gundam: The Origin, Advent of the Red Comet.
So he's starting at Origin. I think Origin is a lot better if you know the timeline already, because you're not even gonna see Gundams in that show, not until the very end, because it's more of a origin story for Char and Sayla Mass. So you're not going to see the main characters from the original show other than those two, really. It's definitely a really good show, and it's well animated. But I think I would still recommend going with Unicorn first. That way you kind of get the idea of what what Gundams actually are. Because this is going to be mainly just how the Zeon came to power, which is the bad guys in the original show. So you're kind of seeing how they became the bad guys and how they're not exactly the bad guys, which I think is what Gundam does really well. It'll take your classic good and evil and then kind of throw it on its head. It's like, oh, well, not all the bad guys are actually bad, and some of the good guys are pretty bad. And he mentioned that Gundam's anti-war, and I think that's fairly accurate. It's going to show you the harshness that war causes. But at the same time, it also shows that sometimes you can't just roll over and let evil win. You got to do what you got to do.
A genius move on Sunrise's part, this prequel came out in 2015 but leads directly into the original 1979 series Mobile Suit Gundam. A shiny new anime, Gundam Origins sets up the entire plot for literally everything you're going to watch moving forward and is super important. It introduces Char Aznable, his sister Sayla, Amuro Ray, and the conflict that leads to the creation and mass production of mobile suits. The story starts in UC 0068, that's Universal Century 0068. At this time, humans have taken to space and millions of people are inhabiting giant rotating space colonies that are actually based on the O'Neill cylinder, which was a concept designed by American physicists in 1976 for real human space colonization. And I see that glazed look in your eyes, snap out of it. There's also no Gundams yet, and there won't be. So chill. In the beginning, there isn't even mobile suits. People still live on Earth, but in order to keep the planet from dying, the space colonies were necessary. However, the longer the colonies spent away from unification with Earth, the more independent and unique they became, eventually creating their own cultures and governing bodies. You see, the plan was always to have Earth be the overseers and centralized government of the space colonies, but this became more and more difficult as time went on. One colony in particular, the Republic of Munzo, had begun to fight for independence under a man called Zeon Zum Daikun. They wanted independence from the Earth Federation and the freedom to be their own state, which honestly makes sense. It's essentially what happened with America and Britain. Eventually, it didn't make sense to be ruled by a little tiny island thousands of miles away, especially when they're taxing you all to hell and saying things like tickety-boo. Now let me be clear, the events that transpire in Gundam Origin are all things that you're kind of supposed to know or have sussed out over time from watching the other series. Now you don't have to. That being said,
Yeah, a lot of stuff that goes on in Origins kind of hinted at in other series. Like they'll mention it in passing or kind of a bit of a flashback, or you'll hear some guy telling about what happened, which I think makes watching Origin after you know all that kind of more better.
said, jumping into it can be a bit confusing, so I'm going to give you the basic points and ask that when you watch the series, you drop your preconceived notions of what you think Gundam is. So Zaikun, again, the revolutionary leader of Munzo, dies randomly while giving a speech, which sends the colony into mass panic and riots ensue. Conspiracies run rampant, and Zaikun's children, who are told their father was murdered by his second-in-command Zabi, need to be evacuated to Earth immediately before they become political hostages. These kids would be Casval and his little sister Artesia. Eventually, they become Char and Sayla, major players in the main series to come. Meanwhile, the Zabi family takes over the colony of Munzo. As you can see already, Gundam isn't exactly a knockdown, drag-out series. It's far from a shonen. There is political intrigue, conspiracy, a setting that matches the plot and allows for critical thinking. The line between good and evil is often blurred. Actually, it's always blurred. Sometimes good people can do horrible things and bad people can turn out to be heroes. The idea of each side seeing themselves as a hero is excellently portrayed in these series. That said, whether you think that people can come back from some of the shit that Gundam characters pull is inevitably up to you. All that in mind, the Zabi family who took over the Republic of Munzo is full of pretty evil bastards. They've renamed the Republic to the Republic of Zeon after Zeon Zaikun, the original revolutionary for the Republic of Munzo, as a propaganda move, and begin to work towards full armed rebellion from Earth. Meanwhile, Casval and Artesia, again Zeon Zaikun's kids, get to deal with some pretty serious trauma, which I'm skipping, and end up with new names on the Texas space colony. Yes, it's a space colony called Texas, and it's basically Texas, a colony which Casval eventually leaves with his friend Char to join the Loom Military Academy. Meanwhile, the Zabi family are working on a top secret weapons project called MS. Guess what that stands for? And this is when the S really hits the F. Long story short, Casval gets Char killed in order to fake his own death and then assumes Char's identity. And this is one he will keep for a long time. TLDR, Casval, son of the revolutionary leader Zaikun, becomes Char Aznable, the dude with the helmet. You know what he looks like. And you know what? At this point, I took a day to mull over what I've written so far.
And the difference between those two is they basically look the same, but Char has different color eyes than Casval. And so that's why Casval now, assuming Char's identity, starts wearing the mask. That's what they go with, is that, oh, he says he's got some eye disease from space solar rays and stuff, so he keeps glasses on. And that's how he hides the fact that his eyes are different color, because I guess they didn't have contacts or anything. So that's probably some retconning going on there, but that's what they go with, and that's why Char wears the mask. because it's Caswell pretending to be Char.
And I realize that I'm already overcomplicating things, and that's the problem, isn't it? Anytime some nerd starts talking about Gundam, you lose concentration and it becomes like this incredibly outdated Charlie Brown reference right here. So what you need to know is that the bad guys create a mobile suit army, they begin a full-scale war with Earth, and eventually commit a war crime you couldn't possibly imagine. One so massive that it changes Earth forever, like the actual entire planet. Let's just say the force of the catastrophe was 60,000 megatons. To put that into perspective, the largest nuclear bomb in history had a force of 50 megatons. That's equivalent to 50 million tons of dynamite, over 110 billion pounds of dynamite. Now multiply that by 60,000. That's how intense it was. Anyway, until 2015, people had just heard about this war crime before it was actually animated in a show. But seeing
Yeah, it's mentioned a lot, and they'll show like the initial impact of it, but then you never actually like see how it came to be. And he's probably going to get into it. It's the colony drop, and that's honestly super sad because they show the way they do it in this show is because the people are still on that colony, and so they do like a little mini show on it when it's happening, a little mini story where there's a kid like guarding the exit while he sends his girlfriend down in the shelter, and all his family goes down there and everybody goes down there, and he's like, I'll guard the exit, because they don't know that their colony's getting dropped on Earth and that the Zeons have put poison gas in the whole place, and the only reason the boy doesn't die right away is because where he's at, there's a lot of wind, so it's blowing the poison away from him. So he has to go down and see that when he finally goes inside. And it's just super sad.
Seeing it is crazy, man. But the advent of mobile suits changed everything, and we're just talking mobile suits, not Gundam. Think of them as like TIE fighters and X-Wings in Star Wars, right? Except cooler and far more mobile with the ability to pack high-intensity weapons. Space battle is a lot like naval battles. You got your big destroyers and your little fast boats. The big ships have giant guns, but they can't really hit the smaller ships. Mobile suits, however, can destroy the big ships and each other and people and everything else. But this is how Char Aznavour gains the name the Red Comet. He eventually becomes a mobile suit pilot for the Principality of Zeon, which, if you're paying attention, are the bad guys, the people he thinks murdered his father.
This guy over here on the right is probably the only one that's truly evil in the show, like the main of the main zombie family. The girl over here is pretty evil, but she's also does she does good sometimes. And I don't really know much about this one here because he doesn't last long. But this guy, the dad, the old guy, pretty much compares his son, to Hitler. That's how bad he is. And he also, it's highly implied that he is the one who killed this guy, killed his brother. And he tried to kill him too, but this dude is too tough. This guy over on the right here, or the left here, is probably the best zombie. He's a super nice dude and just wants to do right by everybody. Even though he's also the one who carried out the colony drop. He didn't want to, but he still did it because that's what he was ordered to do by his brother here. And so that's why he gets a lot of hate, because he's actually the one who carried out the colony drop. So he gets a lot of hate online, even though he's probably the best zombie.
How's that happen?
Honestly, it'd kind of like be that movie or that documentary, the Good Nazi, where they've got Himmler, like, oh, Himmler, he did some good, but yeah, he still ran the concentration camps. So, ew.
You gotta watch. But Char is kind of awesome. He flies a customized Zaku 2, which is an extremely early mobile suit unit. Again, not a Gundam, painted red, and sinks 5 battleships in one campaign like a boss. And again, notice I haven't talked about actual Gundams yet, and that's because there aren't any in the war yet. The first prototype is currently being developed in secret on Colony Side 7. The son of the scientist in charge of development on the Gundam is Amuro Ray. He discovers the construction of the mech and begins to study the machine in secret. The main takeaway is that Char is an extremely complex character and a hero for the Zeon forces in what will eventually be called the 1-Year War, at least at first. I'm doing it again. Also, his sister Sayla is super important as well. Let's move on. So you gotta know what the 1-Year War is though, right? It takes place in 0079 of the Universal Century timeline until 0080, which makes it a 1-Year War, but it's where like half of what I'm going to talk about takes place. The next thing you're going to 100% need to watch, absolutely period, is Mobile Suit Gundam. It's not an option to skip this show. Virtually everything that takes place within it is important for the rest.
This is one they really should remake, I think. I think they should condense it down to maybe like 24 episodes, like one season, and do a retelling. And if you're gonna watch this, but you don't really like the animation style, like it's just too old for you, just watch the compilation movies. I think that'd be a good way to do that.
Of the entire series. And for a lot of people, that's going to be a pretty hard.
So I believe it's like 50 something episodes. So some of them can kind of drag on because, you know, just being from the 70s, it's a bit dated.
Hard pill to swallow,
but still a fantastic story.
Mobile Suit Gundam is a 44-year-old anime. And if you've watched a lot of anime from the time period like myself, you know some of it can be pretty rough. However, I stake my credibility on the fact that the original Mobile Suit Gundam is not rough. MSG just hits different. It is a fantastic show that instantly passes the kid dies test in episode 1. That's how you know if an anime is going to be boss or not. Kid dies, you know you're in for something real. And as you can see, the animation is obviously of a different time, and going from Gundam Origin to Mobile Suit Gundam is like a DeLorean trip, but you settle in very quickly. There are definitely some repeated animations here and there, but the overall quality of the show is A+. I would also like to recommend something that I very rarely do, but watch the early 2000s Ocean dub, which you can find on Crunchyroll. It's fantastic.
It is the year 0079 of the Universal Century. A half-century has passed since Earth began moving its burgeoning population into gigantic orbiting space colonies.
I'll take over. I just have to watch the gauges, right?
I'd appreciate it if you could, just until we dock.
You think an old wreck of a boat like that is gonna have what we need?
Try to be realistic, Char.
I'm only doing this to protect myself.
Oh, that's the reason?
Yeah. Yelling at me is really gonna help me handle this thing. Hayato, let's get this over with and hightail it out of here, all right?
Between the dub and the crispy clean restoration, the anime feels modern while looking retro, which is saying a lot for a production as old as it is. The creative team at Sunrise put their absolute all into Mobile Suit Gundam, like more than their all. It's one of those cases where a Japanese team went above and beyond what should be humanly possible, and it shows to this day. Mobile Suit Gundam sets up the foundation for the entire series and timeline. Multiple characters from the series will pop up in later ones, and battles within the show will become legendary, referenced time and time again in later series. It stars Amuro Ray, the first Gundam protagonist and eventual war hero, who you kind of have to understand to get where the series is going. In the beginning, Amuro is a kid living in a space colony on Side 7. His dad is a super scientist guy who's been working on a prototype weapon for the Earth Federation to combat the mobile suit threat from the Principality of Zeon. That weapon is the RX-78-2 Gundam. And a little fun trivia for you, the reason Gundam is called Gundam is because they're supposed to be so badass that they're akin to a dam made out of guns. I'm not lying to you, therefore Gundam.
Yeah, I just have a question. Is this a goddamn? Goddamn.
But when Amuro's colony is attacked by Zeon forces led by none other than Char Aznable, Kid dies, Amuro finds his dad's Gundam and just gets in it. At the same time, the mothership White Base, which had arrived to pick up the Gundam, is now forced to take on refugees from Side 7. Meanwhile, Amuro successfully fights off the Zeon mobile suits and joins the rest of his colonists on White Base, which if I don't mention is a Pegasus-class warship, somebody is going to cry in the comments. But here...
He also kills his dad during that. Alright, well, his dad didn't die, but I don't know, it's been a while since I see. I think his dad died. His dad either dies or he gets hurt and is basically a vegetable after that because of him hopping in the Gundam and shooting a hole in the side of the colony.
Here is where things get weird.
It sucks his dad right out.
Gundam can't...
And yeah, I just can't help myself from spoiling things, so I'll put a big warning at the start of this video.
Be piloted by just anybody. They're experimental mobile suits, and the RX-78 is the first of their kind. They're faster, stronger, and far more complex than a typical mobile suit, especially the weak Federation Force mechs. The G-force a pilot has to deal with when operating one would knock most unconscious, and because of this, Amuro, a kid, becomes its de facto pilot. Thanks to Gundam Origin, this makes a little more sense, seeing as how we now know that Amuro had been studying the thing for a while before the series even started. But at least he isn't alone, right? The few people who survived the assault on Side 7, most of them children, begin working on White Base under Bright Noah, a 19-year-old ensign who is forced to take command of the White Base when the attack on Side 7 kills most of the crew. Kids going to war is a huge part of the Universal Century. So all of this leaves the White Base in a weird no man's land militarily. The fighting crew is
Yeah, the main crew of it gets killed before they can take control of it, and then they kind of are only left with the basically the kids. And they actually redo that kind of premise for Gundam Seed, which Seed also gets a lot of hate, but it's one I absolutely love. I guess Destiny's, the second season of Seed's what gets most of the hate. But it kind of basically retells the Universal Century like story in a bit of a different way and in just 2 seasons. Although I think it might be getting more before too long. I think I remember reading not too long ago they were looking to make some more Gundam Seed. So I hope they do.
Civilian and mostly young teens to straight up children who are forced to take up arms during the worst conflicts since the
And that little girl has a really good manga where she's basically an adult now and is a novelist or a reporter, and she's writing a biography on the first Gundam pilot. So that's actually a manga I'm reading right now. That's really good.
Universal Century began. The White Base also has no distinct designation at first and must journey back to Earth while being constantly assaulted by Zeon forces and Char Aznavour. It's also important to point out again that Gundam was a show designed for adults, young adults, but adults nonetheless.
And that manga, I believe, is called Gundam Pulitzer.
People die.
Yeah,
like
Pulitzer.
Important characters which leave lasting scars on not just Amuro, but the entire crew, and it'll make you upset. The series is essentially one long journey of the White Base as it navigates its way throughout the 1-year war, getting sucked into battle after battle on Earth and in space. As Amuro becomes a better and better pilot, the White Base and its new Gundam become famous heroic figures of the Earth Federation, especially as Amuro becomes more and more badass, eventually having to unlock most of the safety features on his Gundam because it can't keep up with his abilities at a certain point, which brings up a really weird but pervasive part of the Universal Century Gundam story: new types. You see, one of the things the Principality of Zeon is interested in, or is fighting for, is the next evolution of the human species. Of course, this was originally theoretical, but they believed with mankind taking to space permanently, it would usher in a change in the species genetics. And then it actually happens. So what the fuck is a new type? The best way I can explain it is it's like a pseudo Jedi. New types are particularly sensitive,
Yeah, they're basically psychics. They can kind of read each other's minds and I think that's a good way to explain it, like a pseudo Jedi, because even when some of them, the new types die, they basically become Force ghosts almost. And there's a lot of things the new types can do, basically psychokinetic powers at times. That'll come into play a lot in Gundam Unicorn and later stuff.
They can feel other people's emotions or deaths and stuff. They know when danger is coming. They have superhuman reflexes. It's a little nebulous and ill-defined, but when two of them come face to face, forget about it. Weird shit just happens. They can communicate telepathically, like all sorts of stuff. The only thing they can't do is like a force blast or levitate things, at least from what I've seen so far. New types emerge during the 1-year war through stress and trauma to make incredible mobile suit pilots. Again, it's really weird. You'll see. It's also important to mention that throughout all of its battles, the White Base is constantly hounded by Char, as Nabal specifically. However, his long-lost sister Sayla is an active member of the White Base's crew, pitting the two siblings and scions of Xeon against each other. The main reason the series is mandatory is because the White Base and Amuro and Bright Noah are present at every major battle in the 1-year war, including the final conflict. The characters on White Base as well as Char will be in the preceding mainline series, as Mobile Suit Gundam sets the stage for everything that comes next. And by next, I mean now. So for a bit, these series are going to be optional, okay? But they all take place during the 1-year war. Of course, I recommend watching all of them, as some are the best in the entire franchise.
Yeah, there's a whole bunch of side stories or side animes that take place during the 1-year war. And that kind of give different aspects of what's going on both sides, both the Earth and the Xeon.
Let alone the Universal Century, except one. There is one you should absolutely skip. Anyway, most of them are relatively short in comparison to the mainline shows as well.
Which one do you
skip?
skip?
Also spans the entire existence of the franchise. However, we're going to go through them in order canonically, which is also how I think you should watch them, and it's how I watch them. Feel free to reference this video for watch order. The first
I don't think you should watch Gundam canonically. I do think you should start with some of the later stuff first. But I guess for the Universal Century stuff, or the stuff that takes place during the 1-year war, I don't really think it honestly matters what order you do it in, because it's not that too big of a deal, I don't think.
Series after Mobile Suit Gundam.
But yeah, I guess canonically might just make it easier to kind of place where everything's at. But they're not really linked stories. They're kind of serialized in their own little section of the war.
Is a little known one called MS Igloo, and let me.
Oh, is he gonna say skip Igloo? I guess that makes sense. Or not Igloo? Was it Igloo?
It is absolutely shit. Like,
yeah,
there is nothing redeemable here from story to presentation.
I guess that's the one to skip. I guess that makes sense.
It looks worse than PS2 cutscenes. Frankly, for a series as great as Gundam.
If you want to see good game cutscenes, there's a PlayStation, I think, that does it with live action, which is hilarious. And they get all the names wrong, but it's actually done really well. Instead of Xeon, I think they call them the Principality of John, because they're like trying to say like Xeon, but as a Geon. Yeah, they're calling it Geon, and so it basically just sounds like they're saying John, just because of how Xeon is translated. A lot of old translations use, instead of a Z, a G, so they call it the Republic of Geon or the Principality of Geon. And so it sounds like they're saying John, which is just hilarious. But aside from the names, and it's super cheesy, but it's still a great watch, and it kind of summarizes the story of the original show. I wish I could remember the name of that. You can find it on YouTube. I might have to find a compilation video or something of that. Watch that sometime, because it's absolutely hilarious.
Igloo and its sequels are embarrassing. They're also incredibly hard to find, and you cannot get them normally. If you really want to punish yourself that bad like I did, prepare for hours and hours of download time. I'm glad it's out there for prosperity, but just give up on Igloo and save yourself the pain. It is not even, it's like not even funny bad. Nothing that happens within it is ever mentioned again, and it's not important. I cannot emphasize this enough. Just don't watch it. So instead, let's talk about Mobile Suit Gundam, the 08th MS team. This short
That's the good one.
Slaps so hard. It was released from 1996 to 1990.
The novelization of it though is terrible. They basically put in a bunch of stupid bad stuff that happens to some of the characters just, I guess, to be edgy. I don't know. It's terrible. But the show is fantastic.
And it has the look I'm always talking about. Sexy, crisp, and clean late 90s animation. This is one of the best.
It's basically Gundam. It's the Gundam equivalent of Vietnam. They're fighting in the jungle.
Looking series in my opinion. As far as the story, it's pretty killer too. It takes place solely on Earth in UC 0079 during the 1-year war in Southeast Asia, where the Earth Federation and the Principality of Xi'an are embroiled in a vicious guerrilla war over resources. It's essentially the Gundam Vietnam War. Reinforcements arrive, including a man named Shiro, who becomes the new captain of the 08th MS team, an elite unit of prototype Gundam, which initially confused me, as up until now the assumption was that Amado's Gundam was the only one in the field. Looking into the 08th MS team's mechs clears up the confusion, right? So if you remember, Amado's Gundam, the original, was an RX-78. These are RX-79 ground types.
They're basically the prototypes for mass production instead of like Amuro's actual like one of a kind super prototype almost. These are like their production units just off the line where they're trying to get everything all tooled up to where they can mass produce them. I have to grab me a drink here in a second. But a lot. Then what's funny is they take the heads of these Gundams a lot and stick them on other units once the Gundam starts becoming well known. Because they don't have enough actual Gundams, but they can make the heads real quick. So they put the head unit of a Gundam on a lot of other mobile suits, just so it looks like they have more Gundams than they do.
They're made of spare lower grade parts that were supposed to be used to mass produce the RX-78. The 79G are also stripped of all parts made for space battle and tweaked specifically to fight within gravitational fields. I don't know, I think that's cool. They also look pretty baller. The main conflict turns into a battle between the 08th unit and a new incredibly powerful prototype Zeon mobile suit. However, there's an emotional twist for Shiro that sends everything into chaos. As far as main characters from Gundam series goes, Shiro is definitely.
I'm gonna grab a drink real quick, but basically, 08th MS team kind of has a Romeo Juliet subplot going on with the Shiro and the Zeon pilot Aina. But I'll be right back real quick.
Militarism, but Shiro is an independent person who is willing to disobey orders if he feels they're wrong. I like this a lot, and from what I've heard from other Gundam dorks, it's definitely up there with the best of the best.
Absolutely.
And then after that is a cult classic that a lot of people have probably heard of, Mobile Suit Gundam 0080 War in the Pocket. While I'm a Gundam...
I haven't actually watched War in the Pocket because I know it's really sad, and I know it's also really good, and I like it. I basically know the story. I've read up on it and everything, but I haven't actually watched it. It's kind of one of those things I've got in my watch list. I have it downloaded, just can't bring myself to actually sit down and watch it.
Journey, I was told multiple times by multiple different people that this short 6-episode OVA is absolutely peak Gundam. It was released in 1989. The anime is beautiful, and I'm sure from the name you can guess it takes place in UC 0079. No, I didn't misspeak. But despite everybody's enthusiasm, in my onion, I think this is one of the weirder side stories, as it focuses on the experiences of a 10-year-old boy. However, because this is such an isolated and small series, and it kind of really encapsulates everything that Gundam is about, it's probably the most popular within the Universal Century. You essentially don't need to know anything about Gundam to enjoy this one. No new types, no complicated bullshit, just a small story about a kid who messes up real bad, like really really bad. But before getting into that, I'd like to talk about the war that Universal Century depicts, more specifically the kind of war that it depicts. Before World War II, there was this idea of war that no longer exists today. There was a romanticism to it, the idea of adventure, camaraderie, exploration, and heroism. At the start of World War I in 1914, troops on both sides of the conflict went into battle with these kinds of fantasies before reality kicked in. Without getting too far into the real history, World War I very soon became a bloody, never-ending feudal massacre on a scale literally never seen before. For years, troops would gain a mile, then lose it again, while constantly being pounded by artillery at all times. They lived in wet holes filled with corpses and toxic chemicals. People lost their minds and were executed for it because PTSD wasn't understood at the time. Gundam takes a lot from that time period rather than World War II, mostly because the Japanese don't want to talk about World War. Common consensus in the latter years of the First World War on both sides was, this isn't war. Soldiers on both sides were soon exhausted, frustrated, traumatized, and just over it. The people on the ground didn't want to fight anymore, but they were compelled to by the brass, who had little compassion or understanding of their situation. Gundam explores these notions often, and it's done well in War in the Pocket. Al Izuhara is a 10-year-old boy who thinks war is awesome. He wants to grow up to be a soldier and fight for honor. However, he lives in the neutral colony of Side 6, a neutral colony who happens to be housing a new Gundam prototype that was launched into space after a Zeon assault on Earth's Antarctic base. An elite Zeon commando unit is sent to Side 6 to destroy this new Gundam, but is massacred, leaving only one soldier, Bernie, alive after he crashes his mobile suit within the colony. He's soon discovered by Al, who becomes infatuated with him despite him being a Zeon soldier. And I don't want to spoil anything at all from this one, but shit goes down hard. Tragedy occurs, there's love and loss, it's a pretty wild ride, and it's also really sad. I enjoyed it, I think I'd watch it again. It's certainly one of the better looking series out there, but compared to a lot of others, it's in the middle of my list. That being said, it is an excellent study of what being young and enthusiastic while completely naive is like during wartime, and how that innocence is so easily shattered. Gundam can be super evil like that. Now next up is another series to initially take place in UC-79, Mobile Suit Gundam Thunderbolt. Again, we got a big jump from 1989 to 2015, and Thunderbolt is easily the shiniest series.
I'm not a huge fan of jazz, so I didn't really care for Thunderbolt because that plays a big part of it. It's definitely well animated, and it's still a really good show. And if you're actually into jazz, you'll probably love it. The characters in it are all amputees, and the way their Gundams are working is they're like linking their limbs straight to the mobile suits. And some of these guys had good limbs before they got into the program. So like they'll get knocked out and wake up and the doctor chopped off more of your limbs so you can pilot the special Gundam better. So it's another one that's kind of a tragedy
So far, and it is also wild. Based off the manga of the same name, MSG Thunderbolt takes place in the Thunderbolt section of space. It's a place densely packed with asteroids and debris from destroyed ships, which can set off electrical discharges regularly. It's a very unstable section of space, and a lot of the background of this series is very complicated, so I'm not going to wreck your mind with it, but you're going to be hit with some confusing stuff immediately if you're watching in order like I've suggested that you do. The first thing is the FA-78 Full Armor Gundam Thunderbolt. This thing is flippin' insane. Looking closer to a mech from...
He's right. You can be kind of confused watching stuff in order. It's why I don't really suggest it to people. I think some of the other shows explain certain aspects of the universe of Gundam a little better. And having that context for these other shows makes them more enjoyable.
From Gundam Wing than one from the Universal Century, let alone a Gundam from 0079. From what we've seen so far, you have the OG Gundam Amado pilots, then you have the ground type and 08th MS team, and of course the prototype from War in the Pocket. But Thunderbolt? I mean, this thing is wild. Apparently developed by an isolated team of Earth Federation mech engineers called the Moore Brotherhood, Thunderbolt was created with the Thunderbolt section of space in mind. This thing is kitted out to the max. It's unlike anything we've seen up to this point, from missiles to the overabundant shielding, Thunderbolt looks like a monster, and it totally is. It's overcompensation to the max in order to make up for the extreme armor. More thrusters have been installed, allowing the mobile suit to absolutely scream. Now, the people who designed the suit, the More Brotherhood, is made up of survivors from the colonies on Side 4, which were destroyed by Zeon, and they are hell-bent on getting revenge. This puts Io Fleming, the pilot of Gundam Thunderbolt, up against Zeon's Living Dead division in the Thunderbolt sector. Io was originally a racer.
Oh yeah, the the ones controlling the Gundams with their limbs chopped off and stuff. That's the Living Dead section. That's the Zeon side.
On Side 4, and is also a jazz enthusiast, which gives the series its extremely unique flavor music. Well, I'm not going to dive too far into that, but what's important to know is that Io
that plays a big part in the show.
The Living Dead sniper unit led by the Principality of Zeon's best sniper, Daryl Lorenz, who is a pop enthusiast, leading to not only a militaristic clash between the two, but a clash between taste and appreciation of the arts. It's important to note that Daryl Lorenz has his legs blown off in a battle early on in the 1-year war. Everybody in this Living Dead squadron is an amputee of some kind. It's really interesting. And Daryl eventually receives his own insane mobile suit prototype, and the clashes between him and Io are a real sight to behold. Thunderbolt is a fascinating and extremely fast-paced series that eventually ties into the original Mobile Suit Gundam, and it's one you are 100% going to want to see. Thunderbolt is a Gundam that people talk about a lot. It's polished all to hell and is a great representation of how good Gundam still is and what modern animation can bring to the series. It's important to note that the canonity of this series is in debate, but I am definitely on the side of it being canon. Why not when everything else is? I don't understand the argument. The season 2 of the series finally takes us into UC 0080, and eventually into my favorite series that I'll be discussing in this video, Mobile Suit Gundam 0083 Stardust Memory. Released in the utopic year of 1991, Stardust Memory is a short series that just hit all of my buttons. First off, I think it has the best look and feel out of everything I'm going to be talking about here, period. There is just something about this time period of animation from Japan that is so iconic and nostalgic. You add in it's a series of OVAs with a solid budget and excellent animation.
Yeah, this one I think holds up better than 08 MS Team, even though I like 08 better. This is an excellent one. You definitely want to watch.
Team behind the works, and you are set up for success. It's 0083. The 1-year war has been over for a while, but the Principality of Zeon forces have stolen a highly destructive Gundam prototype with nuclear capabilities. Naturally, it's up to the Earth Federation to retrieve their stolen weapon. A 19-year-old soldier named Ko Uraki finds himself as the pilot of the RX-78 GP-01 Gundam Zephyranthus.
My only complaint with the main character on this one is he's kind of a whiny little bitch for a while. Kind of like the if you've ever seen what do you call it? Evangelion. He's kind of a Shinji type at the start, where he's kind of whiny. Like he wants to get in the robot at least. But he falls in love with that girl we just saw, Nina, who dated the guy he's fighting for a while. So it's kind of got that love triangle thing going. And I don't know, he's kind of annoying at the start.
Zephyranthus, it's Greek, I don't know. And this is the first Gundam hobby kit I bought. What I loved so much about this one is that it's a very obvious visual upgrade from Amado's RX-78. It's essentially the next in line. It has the same look and feel of the original Gundam. It's just cooler. And this alone makes Stardust Memories feel even more nostalgic after watching quite a few side stories since the original Mobile Suit Gundam. And Ko's journey to stop Operation Stardust from happening is incredibly compelling, and the end of the series' run is one that has stuck with me more than any other that I've watched. It is tragic but really interesting. Stardust Memories, besides being full of great characters and some really cool Gundam prototypes, shows a side of war people literally don't ever get to see or hear about. People who've watched this one know exactly what I mean by that, and if you don't watch anything between Mobile Suit Gundam and the next show on the list, make sure you watch Stardust Memories. It is fantastic.
Yeah, it's not that long either. I definitely would agree with that. They're test pilots is what they're doing on that base there. So when the Zeon remnants come to steal the prototype nuclear Gundam, that's That's kind of the
Speaking
setup
of the
there.
next show, it is finally time to get back on track with the main series in the Universal Century with Mobile Suit Zeta Gundam, not Z Gundam, Zeta Gundam. But I want to make a note here about learning to love characters. The main Gundam series can be a bit difficult to transition between. Each entry has a new protagonist, and each one is vastly different from their predecessor. While technically the sequel to Mobile Suit Gundam, Zeta Gundam stars Camille Bidan, a kid who could not be farther from Amado Ray. You aren't going to be seeing comfortable
Isn't
carbon
Camille
copies
a
of
girl's
Amado,
name?
or even events similar to his adventures with the White Base. While Char,
Sorry, not Char. I mean, Quattro Bagina. No way that's Char.
Bright
No,
Noah,
no, that's
with silver
Quattro
the
Bagina.
characters
He
from the
never
first series
betrayed
show up
anybody
and
in his
play major
life.
roles. Camille is
I like
different.
that
The war is
scalawag
different. Things
Char.
have changed. Sides have changed.
He'll
Players
stab
have
you in the
changed, and
back
it
for a
takes little
donut.
bit to get used to that. And at first, I didn't like Camille. He's more aggressive than Amuro. He's more whiny too. And this, of course, is due to the fact that he gets some pretty serious trauma early on in the show. But what you realize fast is that each Gundam entry has a growing period for the characters. While I initially kind of hated Camille, he and Zeta Gundam quickly became my favorite.
Yeah, he's kind of annoying. He's another one that's kind of annoying at the start, but he does mature and grow as the show goes on. His thing is he hates that people make fun of his name for being a girl's name because his name's Camille. And so he's violent and throws punches because of that.
Favorite in the mainline series. Set in UC 0087 and released in 1985, Zeta Gundam is a different beast entirely. With the 1 year war long over, things have changed, and like all Gundam pilots in the series, Camille finds himself unexpectedly the pilot of a Gundam and embroiled in a massive conflict. However, this time it isn't clear-cut Earth good, Xeon bad kind of deal. There's enemies on both sides, and despite Camille's initial image.
Yeah, and 83 leads into the enemies of the start of this show, which is going to be the Titans. Because the Titans are formed because of what happens in 0083. Because the Xeon remnants attack, so the Titans get formed as a group to combat the Neo Zeons. And of course, they get too much power and start being evil, basically. And at the end of 83, you'll see some of the characters from that show become Titans.
Maturity and temper, he eventually shows a deep compassion, especially after his new type powers awaken. He also has to deal with living in the shadows.
And then you'll get like a three-way going on by the end of this because the Neo Zeon show up. So you end up having like kind of a three-way battle between the Titans, the good guys with the Gundams, and then the Neo Zeon. Or the Titans have Gundams too, I believe. And then Quattro Bagina leading the Aug, which is the people fighting the Titans. And he's definitely not Char Aznable.
Of Amado and becoming a pilot and warrior in his own right. If Mobile Suit Gundam had teeth, Zeta Gundam has fangs. It is a brutal story that further expands the concept of new types and the ferocity of war. And the ending, I can't recommend this one enough. I mean, at this point in your journey, you're hopefully fully involved, but if you're just going from Mobile Suit Gundam to Zeta in order to get the basic story, stick with it. Zeta will have you on the edge of your seat up until the end where you completely fall off. That all said, I do have one issue with the show, and that is Zeta Gundam itself. I really don't like the way it looked with its strangely
I don't really
thin
either.
head. Thankfully, that's not really an issue with the next series, and that would be Gundam
Double Zeta.
Again, not ZZ, Double Zeta. And this series is interesting, to say the least. With the emotional power of Zeta Gundam and its insane ending, I was so excited to immediately dive into another mainline series right away. And then I met Judo Ashita. It is immediately apparent that Double Zeta is not Zeta, and more than that, Judo is not Camille. And this is why I recommended taking in the side content in between Mobile Suit Gundam and Zeta. You get smaller stories, excluding Thunderbolt, that allow you to kind of get used to new characters and events. The mainline shows are much longer. They're usually about 50 episodes, and because of that, you tend to get more attached to the protagonist. By the end of Zeta, I was so dedicated to Camille that switching to anyone else was going to be a bit of a struggle, but Judo was a bit too much. Zeta Gundam was a dark and mature show, much darker than the original and most of the content in between. However, that worked to its benefit, making it one of the best, if not the best, in the series. Double Zeta, I don't know, man, it's whiplash. Judo and his group of friends.
Yeah, I'm not too big of a fan of Double Zeta. The way Zeta ends, it's a tragedy. It's kind of a dark kind of ending. And he's right. It's a whiplash going into Double Zeta, where it's some happy-go-lucky kids and whatnot.
Are poor junk collectors living on the colony where Camille ends up after Zeta Gundam. Judo is kind of a punk but incredibly immature. The entire group of friends is. And like the rest of the mainline series, obviously he ends up with Captain Bright Noah and piloting a new Gundam prototype, this time the Double Zeta. And unlike the Zeta Gundam, I absolutely love Double Zeta so much that it was the second Gundam kit I bought. It's a badass machine. As far as the series goes, it's frustrating. Now I don't want to turn anyone off from Mobile Suit Double Zeta Gundam because it is a necessary watch, but it does have some things going against it at first. Number one, there's no dub.
Before any fanboys get on my case, I'm well aware that there was a Southeast Asian dub that was done in English, but it's basically lost media. You can't find it, and it's also not even complete, so doesn't count.
And normally that wouldn't be.
I would just watch the compilation movie for Double Zeta is what I would do, and then get on to the better stuff that comes after it.
Something I care about. I generally watch things subbed as is, but for some reason I watched all of Gundam minus Thunderbolt dubbed. Part of the reason for that is just how good the dubs actually are, and I really can't express how nice it is to hear good dubs. Second, Double Zeta's initial immaturity as a show after the incredible darkness of Zeta Gundam is kind of a slap in the face. Some of the things the new crew does would get anyone court-martialed in a second, but they get away with everything. It's a little bit unrealistic. Well, they get away with mostly everything. I can't believe it took me this long to mention how often people get slapped in the face in this timeline. It is honestly hilarious. Nobody is safe from the face slap. And it's also not like previous characters hadn't pulled some crazy shit, but Judo's crew is next level, like literally criminally next level. Lastly, the show takes a while to get going. That's really the killer. Again, this is my personal opinion, but Double Zeta Gundam has one of the slowest ramp-ups that I've seen so far. Judo's initial objectives are completely personal, but those objectives, mostly saving his sister, sees him constantly messing up, going off on his own, endangering the crew, and generally pissing people off, making him seem like a total jerk. That said, when Double Zeta takes a turn, it turns hard. Unfortunately, it takes 25 episodes to get there, but when Double Zeta hits, it hits so hard, the characters come together, the maturity kicks in, the darkness comes. I don't know how to explain it other than the payoff is impeccable. It can be a little bit of a weird ride to get there, but it is so worth it. And honestly, given Judo's character, it makes sense that it would take him that long to grow up and get in the fight for real, for a bigger purpose, you know what I mean? It doesn't mean it's always fun to watch him make mistake after mistake to get there, but that's kind of like realistic. My main point is that you really want to stick through that to get to the payoff in the second half of the series. You gotta trust me on it. And this all said, if you've watched any Gundam, including Wing or G, you know that the best parts always come after the first 25 episodes of setup anyway. That should just kind of be expected. What makes this one harder than the others is that it comes straight off the heels of Zeta Gundam, which would be hard for any show. And so where do you go from there? And the answer is simple. It's Char's Counterattack, which is a movie, and it basically caps off the initial Universal Century run. Everything up to this point is to get to this film, and believe me when I say you want to get there. And after that, you got Gundam Unicorn, followed by 2 movies, Gundam Narrative and Gundam Hathaway. And for reference, Double Zeta Gundam takes place in UC 0088, Char's Counterattack in 0093, and Unicorn through Hathaway spans 96 to 105. That's
And Hathaway's, it's only one movie out. It's going to get 2 more, I do believe. I think it's going to be a trilogy. And then after that, there's going to be something else in Unicorn, I believe. Or not Unicorn, but in Universal Century, I do believe.
37 years of the Universal Century I've covered. The next series, Victory Gundam, doesn't happen until 0153. And man, I am 12 pages deep, single space 11 font, and I feel like I've barely scratched the surface. There's so much.
The stuff that comes later after the like what he said, like Victory Gundam and stuff, that's basically super in the future, where all the stuff that happened on Earth is like ancient history. And also, I really hope they retcon all of that to be a different timeline with the way they've reworked the modern Universal Century with the new movie, with Unicorn and the Hathaway movies. It just kind of doesn't fit, in my opinion. Even the creator of it's like, yeah, I was in a bad place, and that's why pretty much everybody dies in F-95, which happens after Victor Gundam, I believe. But the Xeon no longer exist, and new types aren't a thing, and stuff like that. So that's why I think it deviates too far, in my opinion. That it's basically an alternate timeline.
Within Gundam that can be looked at through a microscope, it's honestly so hard to point out what's so dramatically fantastic about the series in a video like this. I can feel myself wanting to reach farther, but I just can't, given the scope here. But I think that's saying something in and of itself, right? The fact that I want to say more and have significantly more to say. Gundam has had a legitimately profound impact on what I know I can expect from anime. The careful, meticulous nature of the plot progression and, more importantly, character growth is beyond next level. Watching children get sucked into war, maturing and dealing with the harsh reality of that situation, watching loved ones die, and realizing that sometimes you have to fight, especially when you have the power to do so, and the results of what that can cause, how minor mistakes can have huge consequences. It's very impactful. And each entry does this so differently with drastically different characters. It is really something to behold. And also, there's badass giant robots, so go forth and behold it. Most of the series can be found on common streaming platforms like Crunchyroll. Both Origin and Mobile Suit Gundam are, and that's all you need to get started. You will have to dig for a lot of the better, smaller series like 08th MS Team and Stardust Memories, but you're anime fans, you know how to do that. You've done it before, you'll do it again. It's not your fault that certain anime just aren't available any other way. But hopefully, this was helpful and gave you enough of a tease to push you over the edge of curiosity and into action. That's my only goal with this video. I want you to watch Gundam. And again, if you are a major Gundam fan already, please let me know what you'd like me to cover in depth. I'd be glad to do it, and I'd love to hear people's impressions of Gundam when they get into it. So don't forget to come back and let me know what you thought. But for now, that's it. That's all. My name is Mike. This is Bonsai Pop. Check out the sponsor, and I'll see you next time.
Not a bad video. I enjoyed it. I still think the best place for someone who's never watched Gundam would be Gundam Unicorn. Watch Gundam Unicorn, and then after that, in fact, I'd do the Unicorn. I think it's got an OVA series and a TV show. That's one they did like a deal where it was put first as an OVA on the PlayStation 4 store or something like that. At least that's where I watched it. And so I think they turned it into a series after that with like 30-minute episodes instead of like the longer OVA episodes. I think the OVA is better. I don't remember. I checked some reviews on that. I think the OVA is shorter, and I think I liked it better. I've seen both, but it's been a while. But I do think starting with Unicorn would be the way to go. Because it's a shorter show. It doesn't have the long ramp up. Like he mentioned, some of the Gundams take 20 episodes to get into it. That's kind of how the latest Gundam, Witch from Mercury, is. It's kind of got a long build up before you start getting into the good bits. But Unicorn is hitting the gas right out the gate. So if you can watch Unicorn and you enjoy that, then you could start going to some of the older stuff, I think. But right where he left off after Char's counterattack, the next one would be Gundam Unicorn. Then goes into the narrative, which is a direct sequel to Unicorn with the same character. The main character, that's going to be Minerva Zabi, the daughter of the one of the Zabi leaders, and she's the last Zabi, so she's considered the princess of Zeon. But she's the one who's in Unicorn, and then from Unicorn does the narrative, and then right after narrative, there's a time skip, and then it goes into Gundam Hathaway, and Hathaway is the son of Bright Noah, one of the original characters. And I believe there's going to be 2 more Hathaway movies because it's going to be a trilogy. And the Hathaway movie is really good, but if you're not familiar with Gundam, it'd probably be a bit confusing. I think it works as a standalone movie, but there's a few points that might not make sense without knowing some of the other Gundam stuff. That's why I think Unicorn's a good place to start, because it explains everything. It does a quick little recap on how the 1 year war, what the 1 year war is and all that, and then gets right into the action, and I think it's a good place to start. Then from there you can go back and look at some of the other shows. But I love Gundam, if you didn't know, and I think that's gonna be where we exit off on this video. Let me put that there, and y'all have a good one.